All right, hello and welcome to an InDesign tutorial. What we're going to be doing is taking a look on InDesign, and then we're going to use InDesign to do a simple exercise, right? So let's fire up InDesign. Now, when you open InDesign, it's going to look something like this. It might vary with the different versions, but right away you should see some kind of similarity with the other Adobe apps, right? Now, InDesign is primarily used for desktop publishing, basically a very fancy version of Microsoft Word, right? Think of Microsoft Word, but mixed with all of the features of Photoshop and Illustrator kind of combined in one. So you will notice that when you go to, for example, new file here, you see the new document window pop up, and it will look kind of similar to the other new documents from other Adobe apps. At the top up here, you can see where it's giving you the different categories of types of document you can create. So for example, if we go to print, we will see different print sizes that we can use. So what we're going to do is to just take a quick tour of InDesign first before we start to do the exercise. So I'm going to choose a typical letter size sheet, and I'm going to pretty much leave everything here default, and I'm going to choose create. All right, lovely. All right, so let's take a look on this interface here now, right? So if I maximize this window here, this is pretty much what the interface looks like for this version of InDesign. Now, firstly, notice that you see the big page in the middle of the screen, right? And you can pan around. If you hold spacebar button, you can actually pan around. If you notice, the panning is going to be a little different than if you were in Photoshop or Illustrator, because it's kind of locked to just this sheet. Now, InDesign is primarily about documents, right? It is a desktop publishing software. So this that you're looking on is actually a page, and you can have multiple pages in this document. InDesign is actually made to have multiple pages. On the left hand side here, we have our tools, right? And on the right hand side, we have our panels, right? So just like the other Adobe apps, it makes use of panels. And if we go to the window here, we can see the different types of panels. So for example, when you open this by default, you will see that we have a properties panel and a pages panel and some other panels that you see here, right? Other panels can be open. So for example, if I go to window, I might want to have the layers panel. This is what it looks like. Notice that the layers panel is docked right here. I can click and drag it out. I can have the panel out, or I can dock the panel back to this sidebar that's right here. Or I can dock it up here, and now I have a layers panel up there. So it's very flexible, this panel system that's here. And we're going to be switching between multiple panels as we go on. All right, now to zoom, you hold Alt and mouse wheel, and this is what the zoom will look like. Now, I want you to notice that you will see you have your page, which is about right here, but then you will notice this other box that is right here. So those are these areas that are here, right? And this is essentially your work area, right? And this is your page. And the way how InDesign is really let's say hinting how we work is that we put things on the page that we intend to print. So for example, if we're going to create a document, right, we might choose to have those documents on the page, right? So we might choose to have those documents on the page like here, and we might choose to have maybe some documents and images. And this is where we produce the work that we intend to publish, whether by printing or by PDFing or whatever we intend to do with it. Now, in order to make this document, we might have different assets. Maybe we have different photos. Maybe we have different images, shapes, lines, and other assets that we want to use in this document. And the idea is that you place all of those assets in this work area, and then you drag them onto the page to create your page. So it's kind of like an area that you can work with, and you can put all of your assets that you intend to use, and then you just drag the asset that you intend to place on the sheet from this work area and put them onto the sheet here. So that's why this area is configured like that. Now, the way that InDesign works is that pretty much anything you put on screen and you click it, the properties will show up right here. So for example, right now there's nothing on the screen. So what the properties are showing settings or parameters for the page. So for example, they have the size of the page, the orientation, and all of that. Now, my tool bar is on this side, and just because we're testing now, let's say that we want to select the text tool. Now I'm going to zoom in by holding Alt and mouse wheel, and I'm going to click once. I'm going to click on drag. Okay, let's do it that way. And I'm going to say Brian Williams. So this is my name here. Now notice that while I'm in the text tool, my properties panel over here has now changed because I am currently in the text tool. Let's give another example. Let's go to the shape tool that's here, and I'm going to draw a rectangle like that, right? Now notice that my properties is showing me things related to the rectangle. So for example, I can change the stroke and I can change the opacity, right? Now, if you look on this side here, you will notice that there are two different arrows. And if you have used Illustrator before, you'll notice that it's pretty similar to Illustrator. Now, the empty arrow that's here is going to be your selection tool, and it's what you use to select different objects. The filled arrow here is going to be your direct selection tool, and is where you go to select elements that make up objects. So for example, this object here is made up of 4 points, and the direct selection tool allows me to select the points, and you can kind of see the points here, and I can move them around. So I can select the elements that make up this object, versus if I choose the empty arrow, that's the top one, I'm now moving the entire object like what you see here, right? So that is the difference with these two arrows. So the reason I'm showing you this is that if I click on the text tool here, notice I want you to keep an eye on my properties panel that's over here, and look on these settings that's being shown here. Now, every time I select an object, so I'm going to select the rectangle, notice my properties panel changes to settings for the rectangle. And when I click on the text, my properties panel changes to parameters that's related to the text. And this is going to be important moving forward, because most of the settings that we want to change, we have to remember that we have to select the object to then get those, to get the properties to display the parameters for that object, right? Okay, now another thing that I want to highlight is gonna be the pages panel, right? And when I switch over to the pages panel, you're gonna notice this area up here that has a couple pages, and then you're gonna notice this image that's right here. Now, the pages panel is going to give us a listing of all of the pages in our document. Now remember that InDesign is for documentation. So it's intended for us to have multiple pages. So right now this is page 1 because we only have one page. And if I zoom out, holding Control and mouse wheel, you will see that we're only seeing one page. So to insert more pages, we could, with nothing selected, we could go to the properties panel here, and we could click the plus button here, and notice we have 2 pages, 3 pages, 4 pages, 5 pages, 6 pages. Now, if you notice, the pages are displayed kind of like a book, right? And this is because this is the default action of InDesign, right? It's really meant to primarily be used for documents. Of course, you can use it to create artwork as well, but it is particularly tuned to create documents. So if I go back over to the Pages tab now, notice that you're seeing those different pages, right? Notice you see page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6, right? And if you were doing a booklet, how these pages are laid out would be important because you will know which 2 pages are beside each other. Now, we can also delete pages by clicking on the pages and press the can button here. We can drag it all the way to the can, or we can just click it and click the can for it to be removed. Okay, so we now have an idea of the user interface. We know that our tools are on the left hand side. We know that our panels are over here, and we kind of have an idea of how properties work. We need to click on the object to display the properties, and we have an idea of how pages work and how to navigate zooming in, zooming out, and panning around. And we also spoke about the work area here. Now, this is pretty much the basics that we need to know in order to get started. So what we're going to do now is let's use InDesign to create a simple multi-page document. So what we're going to do is we're going to close this now. We're not going to save. And before we actually start to create something, the first thing we want to do is design this document. We want to have an idea of what is going to be the layout for this document that we're going to create, right? So I'm going to use a sketch tool right here, right? And this tool here is actually called PureRef, and it's a great free tool, open source tool for doing basic sketches and for putting pictures and stuff like that. So we're going to use that to kind of plan this document out before we actually get started, right? So what I'm going to do is put this like that. All right, so the idea for this document, we want to have it, we want to do a typical, let's say a landscape document. So essentially, if these were the pages of the book, it's going to be like that. So remember, we are doing a booklet document, and then we're going to have like the writing that's going to be on the book, and there's going to be multiple pages. So just giving you a visual of what we intend to do. We want to do something like that, right? So what we're going to do is we now have to kind of decide how we want the pages to be laid out. So let's say we have a cover page that's going to be here. Then we're going to have 2 more pages here. Let's say this is the cover and this is the back page. And then we're going to have the inside pages here and here, right? So let's get this like that. Okay, good. Right, so this is going to be our cover and this is going to be our back page. Now, for our cover page, let's say we want to have like a picture that's going to be right here, and we're going to have a title that's going to be like about right here, right? So this is going to be our title or picture, and then maybe we have a subtitle down here. So this is going to be our cover page. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to define this a little bit more, right? So as a part of our cover page, what we want to do is we want to have a picture, and this picture we can use a different color for this, right? So let's say that we want pretty much all of the top part of our cover page to have a nice picture. So I'm going to just shade this in here. So that's going to be our picture. And our text that's going to be down here, I'm actually going to move it to the side. So let's say we want to have the word portfolio and then maybe the name of the student here, right? Because our document here is going to be our portfolio. Now, let's talk about the inside of the pages, right? So so down here, there, right? So we have inside 1 and inside 2. Now on one of our inside pages, let's just grab a color there. What we want to do is we want to have maybe like a body of text. Maybe this is information in our portfolio. We want to have maybe like an image that's going to be over here. So this is going to be an image that's going to be like that. Now on this other inside page, we want to have 3 images, 1, 2, and these images should be roughly the same size, right? And then under each image, we want to have a description below it. So this represents text description. And for the back page, we just want to have a, let's use back the same color that's right here. Right. We just want to have maybe an image in the middle and maybe some text information right here. So what we're doing now is we're actually creating a wireframe layout for what we want to do in InDesign. And this is a very important process in learning to use InDesign. Usually you don't just jump in and start to move stuff around and put in pictures. Usually you want to plan out how you want to lay out whatever document you're working on. In this case, it's a 4-page booklet, but it could be a single poster. So this is what we've created here for our layout. And now we're going to use the tools in InDesign in order to do this. Now, if you're following along in the exercise, you don't have to create these sketches. I was simply giving us a demonstration of how you would go about the beginning steps of creating something in InDesign, right? So if you're looking on our exercise that we're working on, you should actually see these sketches that are already created. They should look something like this. So this is pretty much the same thing that we sketched, where we're going to have a cover page, an internal page. These 2 pages will be internal, and then this would be the back page, right? So what we're going to do is open InDesign and start to create something based on this sketch, right? So we're going to fire up InDesign that's here. And what we're going to do is we're going to put this guy over here so that we can still see it, maybe down in this corner. There we go. All right. And we are going to put InDesign over here. Good. So this is what we want to achieve. And what we're going to do is we're going to go to File, we're going to go to New, or we can just click New File here. Now we're going to go to Print. And as you can see, this is a letter size. However, we want to change the orientation to landscape, right? Because the documents that we're creating over here, these are all landscape. All right. Now, everything else we can pretty much leave as default. Over here, we have margins, bleed, and slug. And we're going to kind of learn what these terminologies mean for printing. So we're going to choose create. And if you notice here, we have created our first page. Now, if we look back on our sketch, you can see where this is going to be our front page that's here. What we can do is front. We'll just put a little note here so that we remember. Right. So this is going to be front. That's there. And over here, this is going to be our back page. That's here. Now, the page that we're going to work on first is going to be this page that's right here. So before we get going, let's insert the rest of pages, and we're going to do that by hitting the plus key here. There we go. So if I zoom out, we'll Control and Alt. Notice I have all our pages built up right here. So this page here will be our front page. Let me zoom in here. Right, so this page will be our front page. This will be our two internal pages, and this will be our back page. So to make life easy, what we're going to do is we're going to work on this page first. So I'm actually going to zoom in. I'm going to scroll down to this page here, and let's go full screen. And I'm going to just paste the note. I'm just going to paste the note here. Now, what you saw a while ago is a tutorial. If it's the first time you're using InDesign, you're going to get a tutorial. So notice I've just pasted the image that I had here in my sketch, so I can put that one side, and we're actually going to create this guy right here. Now, in order to do this, whenever we're doing layouts in InDesign, it's important to know what these lines mean. So right here, this is our margin. So it's just, think of it as a kind of safety line so that we know that, okay, we don't want to put any text outside the margin, right? And we can adjust the size of this margin. Now, for our purposes, we're going to go to File, and we're going to go to Document Setup here. And you notice here is where we can actually adjust the margins. Now, right now, this is saying that it is 3 picas. So this is a type of unit that is used in creating documents. Of course, we're used to inches and millimeters. We're not really used to this type of unit. So I'm going to cancel that, and we're going to go to Edit, Preferences, and we're going to go to Units. And what we're going to do is we're going to change our units. Here we go with pica, that's here. We're going to change our units. We're going to leave this on points, but we're going to change our horizontal to millimeters and our vertical to millimeters. All right, so we're going to choose OK. Now let's go and set our margins. So we go to File, and then we go to Document Setup. We could also go to Properties, I believe. Let's see, Margins, here we go. So notice everything is in millimeters, right? Now, if you're using a different version of InDesign where you don't have this Properties panel, maybe you're using an older version, then you need to go to File and go to Document Setup, right? Notice it's also there. So we're going to continue. We're just going to use it in Properties. So right now it's 12 millimeters, and we could set this to 5 millimeters. And notice that because there is this little link icon here, it changes the top, bottom, left, and right margins to 5. All right. Now, what we need to do is to start to lay out our information. Now, the idea here is that we want to have an image. We want to have an image that's going to be here. And in order to insert images, before we actually place an image here, we need to set up our frames. So frames is very important to InDesign because it's kind of like creating a digital version of the sketch before we start to insert our information. So the frames icon is located here. That's our frame tool. And think of a frame as a container. So instead of putting an image in the location, instead we will put a container. So I'm going to click frames, and I'm just going to draw it. I'm not going to decide on the size yet. I'm just going to draw a frame. This is what it looks like. It looks like a box with an X in it. And the X simply means that it's empty. Remember, frames are for inserting information. It could be pictures, it could be a document, it could be text. This is what frames are. Now, if we look on our sketch here, we're going to do a more refined version of this sketch. So I'm going to move this up there, and I'm going to just adjust this like that. And notice that it will actually snap to our margins that we have right here. All right. Now, The next thing that we want to do is start to put our body of text, right? So we want to have some text here. Now, of course, in our sketch, we didn't really specify like how much text. So this is going to be a more accurate version of this sketch. So we have to actually determine where on how much text we want to place on this page. And to do that, we're going to use the text tool. So the text tool is located here. Use that T. And we're going to grab the text tool like that. And I'm just going to draw it first. Text tool. Right. I'm just going to draw. And notice that when you draw the text tool, and if I type, you will notice that whatever you type remains inside that window. All right. So let's delete this text here. And I'm going to use my selection tool and I'm going to move the text window in place. So what I'm going to do is, let's say that we want to have a paragraph of text here and we want to have 3 paragraphs of text. So I'm going to put them one on top of the other like that. All right. And then we want to have a title text that's going to be here. Maybe we'll have a title like that. So I'm actually going to leave this space up here empty. Now, a cool feature of InDesign to get an idea of what this would look like is by inserting what's called placeholder text. So I can right click this window and say fill with placeholder text. And if you notice, what it's creating here is a type of text that's called lorem ipsum. Think of it as professional gibberish. That's what I like to call it. So it's basically just simulating what a body of text would look like. So I'm going to do the same thing here. Fill with placeholder text. Fill with placeholder text. And I'm going to just align this a little bit more like that. All right. Now there's one interesting thing about InDesign, and that is if you're familiar with a precision drawing software, let's say like AutoCAD or any program that allows you precise controls. Well, InDesign does that for documents. So for example, right now we place some bodies of text that's here. If you notice, between the bodies of text, you have some spaces, and you have spaces between the text and the image that we have right here, right? And what InDesign allows us to do is to be very specific about those distances. So for example, let's say we want this distance that's going to be here to be the same distance here and the same over here. This is where we can start to use guidelines in order to do this. So in order to get guidelines, it works just like Illustrator and Photoshop. Make sure that the rulers are on. Now, if your ruler isn't on, you are able to see it by holding Control and pressing R, or you can just click Show Rulers here. In this case, I have the rulers already. So I'm going to just, well, let's remove this line here. Right, so I'm just going to drag from the ruler outward, and you will see this line. And I'm going to just find the closest point here. And I'm going to drag out another one, and I'll make it about 5 millimeters apart. So you can see I have this line here. And now what I can do is I can adjust my image to line up with these guidelines. So you can see these texts have lined up right there. And since we're working with 5 millimeters, I'm going to drag this body of text out here, because remember we had 5 millimeters from the edge of the page here. So I'm going to drag those out like that. Then I want 5 millimeters between these pages. So I'm going to drag from the top downward. There you go. And I'm going to drag another, I'm going to drag another one down to the end of the page here. So as you can see, I have 2. I have one that's actually, it's on right on the edge of the page. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually draw a rectangle. If you see, I can actually select these guidelines and I can copy them, or I can move them. So let me copy it. Let me move it. So notice you see me moving the 5 millimeter guidelines there. And right away I can adjust this body of text. Well, let me adjust this one to be down here. I'm going to move this line here by selecting. I'm drawing a box to intersect with those guidelines, and I'm going to move it downwards. And then I'm going to move this text down like that. Then what I'm going to do next is I'm going to select those guidelines again, and this time I'm going to hold Alt, and notice when I hover over the guidelines, my mouse changes to a double arrow, and I'm just going to drag these guidelines up. Let me do that again. Select and drag. So I've made a copy of those guidelines, and I'm simply going to just align this here, and then I'm going to move this body of text down like that. Adjust this like that. I'm going to copy it one more time, and I'm going to adjust this here. So what you notice now is that your document is becoming very precise because we have distances that's based on guidelines. And what we're doing is basically creating a grid to organize our information, right? So now what you're looking at now, it looks very technical because we're looking at all of these boundary, these margins and guidelines and X's and all of these different lines and shapes. So this document is becoming a little bit technical in how it looks, but these are not going to be printed when we produce this document. These are just here to help us to align the document, right? All right, so next we want to put a text here, right? And we're going to call this, since this is a portfolio, we're going to call this project. I'm going to put project, and this is going to be a title text that we want to be large in this area. Now, there's two ways that we can insert text, right? Right now, this is pretty much a text box. So if I adjust the box, the text will wrap and fit in the text box. So for example, notice that if I move this here, the text breaks and goes down the bottom. How you get a text box is that when you click text, if you click and drag, you will get a text box. So if we don't want the text to go in a second line, we have to make sure that the box for the text is much bigger. All right, so in this case, we want to have the word project that's here. We want to have it in full caps. We also want to make it larger. So if we remember how properties work, we need to select this text here. And then our properties now will show parameters that's related to the text. And what we're going to do now is increase the size of this text. We're going to call it project. Notice that it's getting big. It's being hyphenated here because it's falling outside the box. Notice that you also get this red marker that's right here. This tells you that, hey, there is text that has fallen outside of the viewable areas of the box. So we're going to make this bigger, and we're going to put project here. All right. Now, we're not necessarily going to use this font. I'm going to change this font now. So if I click on it, you can see this is on Minion Pro. I am going to use Century Gothic Bold, right? And I'm going to change these here. So I'm going to hold Shift and select these other bodies of text, and I'm going to change them to Century Gothic, but not bold. Now notice when I change it, you can see that they all have these red markers to say, hey, this paragraph has fallen outside of the allocated space. So this is going to be important later on, because when you are planning documents with InDesign, you literally have to also budget how much words or how large the paragraph you want the paragraph to be, right? Because the length of the paragraph will actually affect the design of your page, right? So in this case, what I'm going to do is I am going to just delete a sentence here, or rather I won't delete it. What I'll do is I'll right click and say fill with placeholder text. Well, I need to delete it first, and then say, let's go again, right click, fill with placeholder text. I'm going to do this again. So I'm going to double click, delete the text here, and I'm going to say fill with placeholder text, and the same thing here, right click. So what I do, I have to press escape so I can click on the text box and then say fill with placeholder text. Now one very important thing with how text works in InDesign, and to show you guys that, I'm actually going to drag out my tool palette here, and I'm going to expand it by pressing these arrows, and I want to speak about this area that's right here. Now notice in InDesign, it's a little similar to Illustrator, where you have a fill color, a stroke color, right? So for example, if I have a rectangle here, right? Notice that when I click on it, it's telling me that there is no fill, but there is a black stroke. So if I click on this black stroke here, you can see that it's saying that the stroke is black. That's right there. And of course, if I click on the rectangle here, I can change the size of the stroke, and I can also change the color by, I can just double click on the stroke here, and I'll just grab another color there just to show. And notice that it's saying, this line here is saying there is no fill, but there is a pink stroke, right? So that is how this works. Now, the interesting thing about InDesign is that text works similar as well. If I click on this text here, notice that the fill and the stroke is for the text box, but the text itself also has its own fill and stroke. So for example, notice these two shapes that are here. So when it's on the rectangle, it's telling you that, hey, you are controlling the fill and stroke for the shape. If I change this to text, you're controlling the fill and stroke only for the text. So let me give you an example of that. If I click on this here and I click on project, and let's say that I want to fill it with I want to put a stroke around the word project. So what I'm going to do is I can actually just double click the stroke here, and it will come up with a color. And I'm just going to pick a color here, right? Just for this example. Now, if you notice, there's actually I'm going to make the stroke a little bigger. So I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to increase the size of the stroke. Notice that there is now a green stroke around the project. And what I can do is in properties, I can center it like that. So notice that it is centered. And if I click these little dots here, I can choose like how much space I want to make it from the top. So I can increase the space that I want for the line on the top, but we're not going to edit that now. What we're going to do is I want to switch this over to text. And then notice now that the text itself has its own fill and stroke. So for example, right now, this text has a black fill. If I choose stroke here and I double click it, I can actually choose a color for the stroke. So let's say that I choose maybe like a weird color just to demonstrate this. Notice that the text now has a stroke. So just wanted to highlight this to say that you have fill and stroke for both the shape and the text, right? This is something that's unique to InDesign. Now, what we're going to do is we are not going to put a stroke on the text. So when we click the text here, we're going to click this no to apply none. So now we have removed the stroke from the text that's there. Now we're also going to remove it from the shape. So make sure that when you click on this, you are on shape, and we're going to remove it there. So now we're back to the original text that we have there. And we're going to left align it so that it is aligned there. And we're going to leave it just like that. So what we're going to do, so let's delete this shape here. We're going to put a large number symbol that's going to be here. So it's going to say project 1. And what I'm going to do is duplicate this. Now I can either Control C and Control V to copy and paste, or I can hold Alt. Notice that when I hold Alt, the mouse changes to this double cursor that's right here, right? So I'm going to just click and drag. Then I'm going to change this to the number 1. Use my selection tool here. I'm going to redock my tool panel. And I'm going to make this one really big. So I'm going to select it and I'm going to increase the size of it. Oops, I think I made it too big. Right. Let me go to my selection tool and I need to make that big like that. Right. Now we need to, let's increase the size of this text here. Let's make it 120. There we go. And what we're going to do is we are going to center this like that. We want to center this inside of the text frame. So we're going to go over to properties and we're going to select options and say vertical justification center. So now this is in the center here. All right, so now we're going to use those tools that we just used a while ago. So what we want to do is we want to apply a fill. And for now, we're just going to choose to fill this here. So make sure you change this to fill. Let's bring up our swatches. That's right here. And we're going to fill it with, let's just use a generic color for now, red. Now we can also change the fill of the text, but we have to switch to text, right? Now notice we can also do that over here, right? This is the same icon that you see on the lower bar here. So we're going to choose that there and let's choose white. There we go. And we're going to just move this and align it like that. So it says project 1. Okay, great. So we can see that we have aligned this like that. Now, what you'll notice on your handout is that there's actually a link that can bring you to the location of the images that we're going to use. So for example, here is the handout and notice it gives you a place that you can access some assets that we're going to put on the board here. So when you click that link, it should take you to this folder that you can download the back page and the pictures. So if I click this here, you can see these are the images that we intend to use, right? So what we're going to do is we are going to download this PSD file. That's here. There we go. And when you download that PSD file, this is what it would look like. Now, one of the awesome things about InDesign is that you can actually insert Photoshop files in InDesign. And this is a Photoshop file with some custom text with this smoke texture, which is pretty cool. Now, to build an effect like this in Photoshop, you will definitely need the tools of Photoshop. However, what we want to do is insert that image in our frame here. And in order to do that, what we're going to do is we are going to go to File. Make sure we select the frame first. We're going to go to File. And we are going to go to Place. Then we're going to browse to where we downloaded that file, which is here. And we're going to choose Open. And what you'll notice is that it has placed the Photoshop file inside of the frame. Now, of course, you might notice that it's not exactly fitted inside the frame. Some of it is cropped. And how we can edit this is by double-clicking in the frame. And if I zoom out here, you will notice that you see this brown frame that's there. So this brown frame represents the original size of the image, right? And the idea is that we want to be able to adjust this, right? And we can adjust this and we're going to hold Shift. And notice that as we adjust this, we are adjusting the position of the image inside the frame, but it doesn't extend beyond the frame. So we're going to adjust it like that so that we have it there. Now, another cool thing we want to do is we want to use the same color for the one to make it the same red or maybe this orange area. And to do that, we're going to choose the one that's here. We're going to make sure that we are on Fill, Shape Fill, and we're going to use that color picker tool and we're going to select the color here, which is pretty cool because we can select any one of these colors and it kind of just gives us a recommendation. So I can click here and we can choose any one of these guys here. Now, another cool thing, if you're using the newer version of InDesign, let's say that we want to make this a color that is being used in this frame here. Well, we can select this object here, make sure that we are on shape fill, and then we're going to use the color picker that's here. And if we click anywhere inside of this, what the color picker does is that it identifies where colors have been used. So for example, there's a shade of red there, there's another shade there, there is orange here, here is the brown, and there is like a pinky shape here. So what it does is analyze this photo and say, hey, there are multiple colors that you can use in this photo so that this matches with the colors here, which is pretty cool, right? And what you can do is just choose this plus here, and then it will add it to our list of colors. So let's choose this one, for example, here, and let's add it. So notice that you can see that the theme have been added to our swatches, right? And you can access your swatches from here. If you're using a different version of InDesign and you don't see the swatches, you can always go to Window, Color, and then open swatches. All right. So now we can actually pick a color here, and that will be the color that's used here. We can try another one. There we go. So that is actually pretty cool. Now, as we were saying, this is a kind of a construction view for a document. So notice we see a lot of lines and guidelines that's happening here. Also, if you look closely, you will see that the word actually looks a little pixelated. That's there. And this is because this is like a preview mode. Now, if we go to view and we turn on overprint view here, notice that everything looks clean and high resolution. I don't know if you can see it on the video, but you can try it on yours. So overprint will show the highest quality pictures there in your document. However, if you have like a 100-page document, that may slow down your computer. So this is why overprint is usually off and everything looks a little bit blocky. Now, same place on the view. If we go down to screen mode, notice we see a couple modes here: normal, preview, bleed, and slug, and presentation. So if we switch our screen mode to preview, notice that we see everything now without the guidelines. So we can kind of see what our document is looking like. So let's also turn on overprint. So now you're seeing it at the highest quality, right? Now something very interesting here, I'm going to turn off overprint and I'm going to go to screen mode and switch it back to normal. One other precise tool that InDesign has, right, is the fact that let's say that you're working on a document, maybe with a group member, and there's a person that's working on the design of the document or the poster, whatever it is, but there are other persons that's working on the actual text, the actual information that's going to go in the document. Now, the great thing about this is that when you're designing the document, you can actually design it to hold a certain amount of text. So right now, if I should go to Window and go to my info window, so my info panel shows information about whatever you're clicking on. And if I double click in this paragraph here, I can see where I have 36 characters, 58 words, 6 lines, 1 paragraph. So this becomes important because the person who is working with you on a document, you can say, hey, you can't give me more than 58 words. So whatever you do, when you're writing this first paragraph, summarize it or extend it so that it's around 50 something words. And that's the idea, in order to keep the design to look the way that you intend it to look. Whoever is doing the words need to do enough words to fit in this area. So you can either change the design of this area, or the person who is doing the words can change how they say the words. That is how you kind of come together when you're putting together a document like this. Of course, if you now have to go ahead and change the design, it's going to now mess up where you have your grids and you have all your spacing laid out. So this is why if you're doing a document in InDesign, especially if you're working with team members, you're going to want to extract this information to say, hey, I have 3 paragraphs. Each of them is a certain amount of words. So when you're giving me the text to put in the document, make it be close to that amount of words. All right, great. So we have created the first frame, and while we're doing it, we have been exploring some features of InDesign, right? So next we're going to quickly go through the other frames for our layout based on our exercise. Now, if we go to properties, we can take a look here and we see where it says, oh my God, I'm not sharing the screen. Like, are you even kidding me? Are you kidding me right now? Okay, so now that we have created this layout here with this page, now we want to create the other layout, and I'm going to just copy it and I'm going to just zoom out and paste it here, right? So just to not get confused here, let me just crop this in. Now we don't have to worry about pasting these elements here. I am just putting them here so that we can keep track of what we're doing. While you're following along, you don't actually have to paste the sketches in InDesign, though it's a good practice, right? So next we're going to create this here, and I'm going to hold Alt and mouse wheel that zooms in and out, while Control and mouse wheel scrolls left to right. So I'm going to scroll this over here. And let's take a look on this. So the idea of this layout is that we want to have 3 vertical images with some text descriptions below, right? And we're going to create that on this page. Now, notice that this layout is called the facing pages layout, meaning that any new page that we create, the pages will be facing each other. And I can give you an example of that here. If I create new pages, notice that the pages are facing each other. So this mode is called facing pages. So let me undo that. Now you can change how InDesign is displayed. So we're going to try that now. We're going to go over to properties here, right? And we're going to turn off facing pages. Now, just in case you're using an older version of InDesign, you may not have this properties bar because this came in a more newer version. For those of you that have the older version, you might have to go to Window and turn on Control, and then you're going to notice you get, it's kind of similar to properties, but it's a little different. So this is how InDesign was originally, where there was this kind of a shortcut properties bar at top, and there was no properties bar to the right. So some of the things that we're using here are located in the, I just call it the OG properties bar. But for our purposes, we're going to disable that. So we're going to use the more modern interface. Hopefully most of us are using the more modern interface. Now, any option that we change here, we can also find it under the different menus, right? So we're going to turn off facing pages, and notice what happens. All the pages are now independent. So this does not affect how the document is printed, really. It's just based on how you want to experience with the document. Would you rather have the pages side by side, or would you rather have them kind of like a slideshow where each of them is independent? Totally up to you. So what we're going to do is we are going to use this mode here, which shows the individual pages, to create this sheet layout right here, right? Here we go. Right. So one of the first things we need to do is we need to have maybe like 3 images, kind of like that. And then we're going to have some text below each image, right? And this is going to be this is just a quick sketch of how we want to go about doing that, right? So before, when we started to lay out a page, what we did was we went for our guides. Let me just stick this over here for now. Right, so we would drag down our guides from our ruler area. So for example, I could drag a guide over like that, and I could drag a guide down like this. And this is how we went about creating the zones on the previous page. However, I want to just use this opportunity to show you a more efficient way. So since we're going to be arranging the grid like this, we can actually go to layout, and we can go to create guides, and we'll get this little handy dialog box here. And what this dialog box is showing us is that it can create a grid layout for us with guides, so we don't have to manually divide the space and move the grids. So for example, let's try, and I'm going to hit the preview button right here, and notice that it's being previewed in the background. So I know that I want 3 spaces, so I'm gonna say 3 columns, right? Then notice where it says gutter, right? And gutter is equivalent to the spaces that you see between these guides, right? And that's perfectly normal. Normally, when we're doing documents, we want to have some kind of buffer between our images or between our text. So we can actually adjust this, but we're going to leave it at 5 millimeters because that's pretty much the same space we had on our previous page. So I'm going to create another row here, and notice that this might not be shaped like this, but that's kind of okay. I'm just going to choose okay. And then now we can actually go ahead and move these guides around. So the idea is that we want to have it something like this. And we'll have the 3 images here. Then we will have a title up here and then a body of text below. So we know that our title will fall in this space here and the body of text will be below. So we're going to draw some frames just like before. And remember, frames is just kind of like a viewport. It's like a area that we intend to drag an image or some kind of content into. So I'm going to draw one more frame here and one more frame here. All right, I'm going to go back to my selection tool here and just adjust this like that. So I have the space for my 3 images. Now I want to have 3 titles in this space. So I can just go for my text tool, and I can just draw a text box in this zone right here. And I'm going to write the word project 1. So notice that, I'll go to my selection tool. Notice that project 1 is here in this text box that I drew. What I'm going to do is I'm going to center it here. I also want to center it in the middle of this rectangle here. So with the text box selected, and I go to properties and I scroll down and go to options, and I see where the vertical justification is at the top. So I want to change that to center and choose OK. So notice now that this is in the center. Now, of course, you could just move it in place, but what I'm trying to instill in us here is trying to use precision, because InDesign is kind of like the AutoCAD of documents. It provides all of these tools to get things exactly centered, exactly by measurements, so you can have a very neat document, right? And we can look at some examples of how we can use these precision tools to get very neat documents. All right, so we want this to look like a previous style. So what we're going to do, we're going to change the font. So same place in properties. I'm going to go down here and I'm going to choose Center Gothic Bold. And I'll probably just make this a bit larger. Now the shortcut to increase text size is Control Shift and the greater than sign. So I'm going to just use that shortcut there, or we could just have increase our font size, which is located right here. All right, so I'm going to call this project 1, project 2, and I'm holding Control to actually drag this over to duplicate it. And I'll call this project 3. Then we want to have a description of the projects below. So I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to go to text. I'm going to draw a text box here, and I'm going to right click and say fill with placeholder text. Placeholder text is great because it gives me an idea of what this will look like. So right away, I know I need to change the font to the same font. So I'm going to change it to Century Gothic, but not bold. There we go. All right, there we go. What I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust this text, and I can see that we have some text being dropped off here. So I can just drag this down and I'll just delete it all the way up to this here. Remember, this text doesn't make any sense. So we're just trying to get the look of how the text will be laid out. And perhaps the next thing I want to do here is I want to try a different justification. So maybe I'll try this one here. And you can see that it spreads out the text exactly in the text box. And then the last line will be justified to the left. So that's pretty cool. I'm going to copy these over again, right? All right. Now I need my pictures to go in here. So we're going to browse to the folder that we linked. All right. So when you click that link, it will take you to this Google Drive folder. So far we have used the PSD file. So we're going to grab these 3 images here, and this is going to represent our project 1, project 2, project 3. So I'm going to just hit download, download, and download. All right, good stuff. So I can move this away. And now I'm going to just browse over to where I have that folder. All right, which is here. All right, so now I have it in my documents. Now the proper way to insert an image is select the frame, file, place, and then I'm going to choose picture 1. And that's picture 1 there. Now again, if I double click this and I zoom out, notice you see the brown areas. So this is just telling you how big the actual image is and what is the ratio. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to adjust it, zoom out here, to be just enough to fit in this area right here. Now let's try a different method to add an image. This time around, I have the image here in my documents. And what we're going to do is this time we're going to drag. Now I want you to notice something. We used this image already. So let's use this one. If I drag this image into an empty spot, I'm going to get this like a thumbnail, and then when I click, the image will come in to our document. I'm going to just make this smaller, right? However, I could also drag this image directly into the frame and release, and look at that. It just goes right into the frame. So this might be an easier way, and I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to double click. Now there are a couple, I can double click and resize. There are a couple options with the, when you right click and look here, right? So you can flip and rotate and arrange and all of these things that's located there when you right click on a frame. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to just make this a little smaller. I'm holding shift so I don't change the ratio of the image. All right, now let's say I want to show it at a different position. What I can do is just double click, and now I'm moving the image around, right? So I think this one looks nice, more to the left. And this one I'm going to double click in there, and I'm going to move this over to the right. All right, and now for the last image, I'm going to show you another way that you can drag images in. So I could right click this in Windows Explorer. I go to copy, and then I could right click on the frame here or go to edit. Actually, I can't copy it from here. I have to drag it in. So let me just put it right there. I'm going to make this a little smaller. There we go. So we're going to do the same thing again. I'm going to right click. I'm going to go to edit and go copy. And I can go to this frame here, and I can go edit and go paste into. So paste into will do the same thing. It will actually paste whatever you have in your clipboard directly into the frame. And I'm going to resize this just like I did the others. All right. And now we have project 1, project 2, and project 3. So we can take a look on, if we want to take a look on our document in nice full form, what we can do is go to view and we can go to screen mode here and we can just go to a preview, and preview will preview just the pages but without the grids and everything. So for example, this here, I realize that I'm going to want it, well, this last paragraph, I probably want this last paragraph to be a little shorter. So I'm going to just delete the placeholder text. Also, I'm going to select all three of these text boxes and I'm going to use the justify. So you can see now that it's pretty sharp right to the edge, and then where necessary, it will hyphenate the words. All right, so we created this other sheet here. Just very simple, just a very simple grid. And then what we did, we just adjusted the grid afterwards. All right, so let's move on to the other pages now. Now we're gonna create another version, right? So if we take a look on our images here, we can see where we have this cover page that we're going to use. And this one is actually created in Illustrator. Okay, so these files looks like this. So this is an AI file that's called insert your name. And what I'm going to do is we're going to configure our title page using this file. So I'm going to insert this. I'm going to insert it using another method, the drag and drop method, right? So I'm going to just drag this Illustrator file and drop it in InDesign. Notice I get this little thumbnail and I'm just going to click it. And you might notice that it's kind of big, as you can see here. And what I want to do is to make it smaller to fit on the page. Now, I want to show you something. I'm going to undo that. And this time, I'm going to just draw a frame like that. And then I'm going to head back to my exercise files here. And I'm going to drag it and release it inside the frame. Now, notice that it's the same size, but it fits inside the frame. So that's two ways that you can drag and drop, right? Now, I'm going to undo here. And for those of you that might have done it the way that we're used to when we're using these programs, we're typically used to dragging and dropping it in the program. Let's say you did drag and drop it here. You can use your selection tool and you can move this around. And of course, you can see the handles, the blue line here that represents the full size of the frame, right? So obviously the frame is going to be too big. However, when you are moving stuff around in InDesign, there are specific ways that you have to use. So for example, if I just try to make this smaller, then what you will notice is that it's the image is the same size, but it's just cropping down the image, right? And that's the way how InDesign is meant to work. These are really just frames, and you can use it to crop down an image. InDesign by default will not try to squash your image or make it smaller. Now, if I wanted to make the image itself smaller, what I would need to do is to double click the image, and then notice now that I get this brown outline. So this brown outline shows us the actual size of the image. And what we can do is that we can resize that that line. So for example, I can grab it right here and I can resize. Now, if I don't hold shift, notice that my image can be really stretched. So I'm going to undo that. I'm going to hold shift and I'm going to resize my content. I'm going to move it around here and resize it. So what we realize now from this exercise is that InDesign has a blue frame that you can see here, which crops our content, and then it has a brown frame which represents the size of our content. So keep that in mind when you're moving around content in InDesign. Look out for the colors of these frames in case you're wondering why your image is not resizing. Okay, now what we want to do is we want to make this image be the cover page of our document. So we need to now select this blue frame, and we need to let the blue frame be, zoom in here, and I'm going to dock this info panel over on this side. All right. So what I'm doing is I'm making the blue frame the size of our page here. I'm attaching it to the margins, and then you can see our content is on the inside of this blue frame that's here. So I'm going to double click in the blue frame now, and notice I'm getting the brown frame, and I'm going to actually make this content a bit bigger like that. All right. Now, if I ever wanted stuff to be centered, you can always select your content and just select the center icon here, and it will center different objects together. So I'm going to select this here, and I'm just going to manually center it because I get a center line marker that's right there. All right, now what I'm going to do, I'm going to actually adjust the blue line up to make our frame go up like that. That's it. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to put the word portfolio here. Now you can copy between pages. What I can do is select this and hold Alt and just drag this up, and then I have this here. So I can call this portfolio like that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to right align it. So in my properties panel here, I'm going to right align it like that. And I'm probably going to let it be a bit bigger. So I'm going to extend this frame. Now remember, this is a frame. It doesn't have anything to do with the text. If I want the text to be bigger, I have to increase the font size. So in my properties panel here, I can increase my font size, which is here. There we go. All right. So now that we have this in, what we want to do here is we want to actually edit this document, right? Remember, this is an Illustrator file that we have placed on this page. And on this page, we have placed a Photoshop file, right? So we realize that InDesign will take both Illustrator, Photoshop files, PDFs, any file format, you just add it to your document. And that's the beauty of InDesign. It is really meant to receive multiple digital file formats. However, if I want to edit this Illustrator file, what I can do is we are going to go to the links panel, right? So I'm going to go to window, and I'm going to turn on my links panel here, and you will see it right here. I'm just going to drag it out so that you can see it clearly. I'm going to make it a little larger. And this is a very important panel in InDesign because what this shows, it shows all the content that I have in my document. Now, by default, InDesign does not embed the content that you put on the pages. Instead, it provides a link to the content. So if I should delete a content, it's going to give me an error message. Let's look on that example. So for example, if I go to my folder here, and this is where I have dragged my Illustrator file from. If I should delete this Illustrator file, notice that you get a little question mark here, and you also get another question mark here. So this question mark is saying, hey, the files are missing. Now, InDesign will still keep a preview of the file, but what happens is that when it's time to print or PDF the document, it's going to give you a low resolution preview because it can't find the original file from which to use, right? So keep that in mind. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back to Internet Explorer here, and I'm going to undo that delete, undo that. Now the file is back. And if I head back to InDesign here, notice that it goes away, and now what you see is a link icon. So that is something very important to look out for. In your links panel, it will tell you the status of every content that you have. So right now I have this file called insertyourname.ai, and if I click on it, it actually gives me information about that file. It's saying that it tells me the name of the file, the status is okay. It tells me like where it's located on my computer. And what I can do from here, I can just right click and choose Edit Original. Now, when I do that, it's going to open up Illustrator, which allows me to edit the original file, which is pretty cool. So I'm going to put my name here and double click this. All right, Brian Williams. And I'm going to put my ID number here, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to hit save and I am going to close this file. All right, so now that I head back into InDesign, this file has just been updated. So now that I'm in InDesign, you can see that the file has been updated automatically. From I click the save button in Illustrator, the file was saved. Let's do that again in real time. So what I'll do, I will put InDesign right here. And I'm going to right click and say Edit Original. So it's going to open that back up in Illustrator. I'm going to put Illustrator over here. There we go. I'll just drag it over here a little bit. All right, so now that I'm in Illustrator, I'm going to edit this and I'm going to say, okay, Brian D. Williams, and I'm going to hit save. I come back over here and notice that it just updates like this automatically. Now, the great thing about this is that if you're doing group work where you have different persons working on different parts of the document, so let's say that you have somebody working on a document where they're typing the text, getting the text information in. You can have another person that works in another program, and when they work on the file and click save, it will automatically update in the document, which is pretty cool. The same thing works for Photoshop files as well. So remember, we had this Photoshop file on this page. I can right click and say Edit Original. And that is going to open up Photoshop. And here I can use Photoshop to make all the changes that I want. So let's say that I move this M over here. Let's say I made this S bigger like that. Let's say I made this E bigger. All right, now I'm just going to hit save. And if I head back over here, notice that the file has been updated in real time. So the idea is that InDesign is kind of like a hub that receives information. It receives text information, image, PDFs, Illustrator files, Photoshop files, and you can actually have multiple persons working on these files. And so you can have a very collaborative experience in using InDesign. If you're working by yourself, it's the same thing. I could have done this title page directly in InDesign, but let's say that I want features that are only found in Illustrator. Then I could build this in Illustrator and then link it in InDesign. All right, so that is how we get these pages for our document. Okay, so now that we have our document, what we want to do, let's try one more feature of InDesign. In this case, I have 4 pages. And let's say that I want to add a page number, right? So remember, InDesign is great for multi-page documents. And this might be a feature that we might use, especially if we use it to build portfolios, right? Now, before I show you this, I wanted to show you something real quick. If I go over to the pages section to show you this, let me go back to properties, and I'm going to turn on back facing pages. So now I'll have the pages facing each other, right? That's how InDesign was in the default. I'm going to go back to pages and notice you have these sections here up the top. And the reason for these is that it's basically a way that InDesign it's like master slides. If you've used a presentation program before, you can have a master page, and anything you put on that page, it shows up on all the pages. So a good example of that is, let's use a simple shape. Now, in order to access the parent page, I call it the master page. It's InDesign sets it as a parent page. You do that by double clicking. So this side is the parent page for all the left sides of pages, and this one over here is the parent page for all the right side. So what do I mean by that? Let me just grab a box here. And if I just draw a box like that, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to fill this box green. And if I go back to my pages now, and I do that by double clicking one of these pages here, notice that a green box shows up on all the left pages. So even if I created more pages like this, notice that a green box is on all the left pages. And the reason for that is, let me just undo. The reason for that is that on the master left page, or the parent left page rather, I put the box there. If I was to put a box on the parent right page, right, and what I can do is just make that a different color so you can see that, then naturally when you look back on the pages, you will see the box there. Now in this case, the box is actually behind the images here. All right, so this is how the parent pages work. Now the reason that I show you this is that if we want to add page numbers to each of the pages, ideally we just have to add it to the parent page and then it will add to all the pages. So let's take a look on how page numbering works in InDesign. So let's say I want to put my page number in the upper left corner here. Well, what I can do is, let me just get my text tool and I'm going to just zoom in and I'm going to just draw a shape here and say page. I'm going to go to properties and I am going to choose the same font, which is going to be Central Gothic. Let's do Central Gothic bold. And I'm going to put a little slash there and then make this a little larger. This is where I want my page to go. So what I want now is for this to detect what page is currently being shown here. And the way how I do that is not by manually typing in the page numbers. So I'm going to erase this. It's by inserting a special character. So to insert a special character, what I do, I go to edit, I go to type, insert special character, and then I'm going to go to markers, and then I go to current page number. All right. So notice it says 2 there. So if I zoom out and check this out, if I go to my move tool here and I move this to this page here, notice that it updates. It says this is page 1. If I put it here, it says this is page 2. And if I put it over here, it would say that it is page 3. So this special character here, what it does is it automatically displays the current page, which is pretty cool. All right, let's try and insert another page number there. So I'm going to say the word of. Now to insert the total page number, you go somewhere a little different. So you still go to type, but instead of inserting a special character, we are going to go to text variables. And this is almost like a way of programming what you want InDesign to display, right? So for example, when I go to text variables, I'm going to go to insert variable, and I want to show the last page number. And these are, you see some other interesting things that I can display. I can display the file name and all of these things, but I want to show the last page number. So I'm going to click that. So now this will dynamically update. So for example, it has 4 pages. So if I should go to pages and insert more pages, now I have 8 pages. If I go back here, it says page 2 of 8. Right? So this is how we would dynamically get stuff to update in InDesign, by inserting some kind of type variable. All right. Now, of course, we want to put this on each page, but we don't have to copy this. But we could if we wanted to, because when you move it to the new page, it will automatically update. Or, of course, you could just put it on the master page. So I'm going to undo that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to edit and go to cut. And then I'm going to go to the master page on the left. I'm going to stick the page number here. All right. And then I'm going to go on the right. And I'm even going to go to properties and I'm going to right align it like that. So it goes on the right. So now if I go back to pages, notice it displays on the left and on the right of each page. So that is pretty cool. Now, of course, for here, notice that it is actually showing behind the page, but it's still there. Okay, so now you can see that we have a page number on all of the pages. Now I'm going to go ahead and delete these additional pages here. I'm going to make back one page. Oops, this page here. All right, so this is what we had before. The title page, a kind of a topic or chapter title here, some projects, and then we had a back page that is here. Now, I want you guys to go ahead and create that back page. It's really simple. It's just an image with a text below, right? But for what we're going to do now, I want to show you some other cool features of InDesign. Now, remember we spoke about frames from before and how everything in InDesign has a frame there. So for example, this image here, if I double click it, I get that brown frame and I can move the brown frame within the actual frame. Now you can also edit the shape of the frame just as if it was a vector object. And to do that, we're going to select the direct selection tool and I'm going to actually move this. I'm going to move this here. Now to demonstrate the direct selection tool, I just want to show you how that works. So I'm going to go to a little area here and I'm going to draw a rectangle. Now, when I'm on the selection tool, I can click this rectangle and move it around. But if I wanted to move the points that make up the shape, I would have to go on the direct selection tool and then I will just click the point here. And if you look closely, you will see that this point is actually filled, but this point is actually empty. And you can see it because it has the little white mark there, right? So this point is actually filled here. So when the point is filled, I can click and drag and I can move it around. I can even go to my pen tool, which is here, and I can add a point. Notice I have to wait until it changes to the little plus icon, right? So it has to be on the plus icon, not the star, on the plus for me to add a new point here. And then I go to my direct selection tool, click on it, click on the point once. Oh, I have multiple of them selected. So I'm going to deselect and then I'm going to click on the point. So see, I can actually move these points around. So that's just a quick demonstration of how that works. Now, the same way we could move the frame around here, it's the same kind of frame that is around this shape here. So I can go to my direct selection tool, click. I'm going to just deselect. Let's go again and click. Now, you have to make sure that you are in the right frame. If I double click inside here, I'm going to get that brown frame. But what I want is the blue frame. Now to do that, I need to double click again so that it changes to the frame around here. That's around the image. Then I can highlight this and I can move it. So I would end up with something like that. Now the interesting thing about this is that frames also surround text as well. So for example, I can have select these texts from here and I can go to properties. I'm going to make sure that I select to justify them where it fills the frame of the box. I think I changed the font by mistake here. Hang on a sec. Right. So these must be Century Gothic. There we go. All right. All right, good. So now that this is Century Gothic, I can choose Century Gothic Regular. I want it to be Century Gothic Regular. Then I'm going to justify it so that it fills the exact shape that it's given. And what I'm going to do now, I'm actually going to adjust these frames. So if I kind of zoom in here, I'm going to use the direct selection tool and I'm going to make sure that I select. You can see the space here is now blue, and I'm going to drag that here and I'm going to drag that here. Actually, maybe what I want to do is to give it a little space. So when I drag it here, I'm going to kind of do like that. So I'm going to give it a little space here so as well, so that it's not touching the graphic. And I'm going to do the same thing here. All right. So let me deselect. All right. So if I go to view and then go to screen mode and change it to preview, then what you notice happening is that I have the text that is actually following the edge of the shape here, which is pretty cool. And the way how I did that is that I adjusted the frame around the text. So what you should take from this is that everything in InDesign has a frame. Everything. So I can actually adjust the shape of the frame. Now my frames doesn't even have to be a square, right? I could have a frame here. If I click on hole, I can get an ellipse or I can get a circle. And this circle is actually a frame. Let me just give it a color here, a shape here. Right. So this is actually a frame, but the frame is a circle. So for example, if I should grab my folder here and I should drag an image, actually I just realized the reason I'm not seeing this frame is because I am actually in preview mode. So I'm going to go back to normal mode. There we go. So now you can actually see the frame. I actually have it on this page. I can move it down to this page. Right. So that's my frame there. And I don't want to have a edge on my frame. So I'm going to go over here and I'm just going to say for this guy here, I'm going to say I want no frame. Good. So I'm not going to get a black outline. So as I was demonstrating before, I go here, I can just drag an image and there it's now inside of this frame. And I can double click and I will get that same blue frame. And what I'm doing here, I'm just holding shift to resize it inside of this little shape here. And there you go. So I now have a round frame. If I want to move the frame in and not the picture, I need to double click to make sure that I'm on the frame. And you have to watch what you're actually moving, because if you see me move this here, I'm actually moving the frame. But if I click once again, now I'm moving the image inside the frame, right? So you have to watch out for that. If I double click, then I'm back to the frame again and I'm going to resize this. Now, here's a little trick with adjusting the frames. If I just make this bigger, it's going to make the frame bigger. And then I have to double click again and then make the image inside bigger. Let me undo that. But you can actually scale the frame and the image inside. But this time you have to hold Control Shift and scale this up and down. And now when you hold Control and Shift, you won't be changing the frame by itself, but you're also changing the size of the content in the frame. If I release Control and Shift, now I'm just scaling the frame, as you can see here. So that's just a neat tip when using this. All right, so that is how we use frames in InDesign. So you can see that InDesign, it's all about laying out your content in various frames and then filling those frames with content. And what you do, you change the shape of the frame in order to get it to look the desired, to get it to show the desired design that you intend. Now, InDesign has many more features, but at this point, what I want you to do is to now use the features that we have done here and create a layout similar to what I have done here, using all the features that we went over to achieve a 4-page tutorial, 4-page portfolio, right? Now, when you're done creating anything in InDesign, of course, you can now print it. Usually there's a process to PDF what you have created. And to do that, you go to File, you go to Export, and you will see this dialog box comes up, and then you export a PDF. So if I choose Save Now, then I will get a dialog box. And this dialog box is asking me, basically, how do I want to export this file? One of the more important things to look at here is this section here, where it speaks about, do I want to export pages or do I want to export spreads? So in InDesign, this is a spread, right? Which is the space that we see around the image. So this is a spread. So if you choose the option to export spreads, then you will get these horizontal pages here. If it's on pages, then of course you're going to get the pages as individual, even if they're beside each other, right? You can choose how you want to export. Now, in our case, we're going to be exporting pages. We're going to be exporting all the pages. And there's a bunch of other options that we can choose here. For example, marks and bleeds. This is important. As you saw here, there's actually a margin that's around the content. So you can choose the size of the margin if you want to show the margins as well. Sometimes when you're printing documents, you want to cut the document to a certain length, and you set up markers so that you can do that. So this just gives you a bunch of options when you're exporting, but we're just going to leave most things at default and choose export. All right. When we do that, we get a PDF, and this is what that PDF looks like. Notice because I chose to export as individual pages, it is now individual pages. And you get everything to the highest quality because remember, InDesign, it doesn't store the content, it links to the source content. So what it's doing here, it's linking to the Illustrator file and printing it as an Illustrator file, but through InDesign. So you get the best quality. Same thing for these other pages. All right. So that is how we create a document using InDesign. So I want you guys to go ahead and try this and see if you can create this 4-page document using InDesign. Good luck.